Hey fellow guitar nerds, there's been quite a bit of support for the idea of me doing a video or series of videos showing the process that I use when I'm designing a new circuit. And as I got thinking about this, I decided that a series of shorter videos seemed to make more sense because one long video showing the entire process from start to finish could result in a really long video, and I personally don't have the patience to sit and watch through a really long video. And also, it would allow me to create each video with a very specific topic and really specific goals. So that's what we're going to do. I've got a 5-part series mapped out for taking a circuit from initial idea all the way through to a finished pedal. Now let me start out by saying that I am by no means an expert. I'm simply an avid hobbyist, but what I'm going to be showing you is what has worked well for me for a couple of dozen designs that I've made. Now the first phase of pedal design is going to be the concept and definition of the circuit. What we want to do is we want to figure out what exactly do we want to make, how do we want to get there, and what's going to make it different from something else that's out there. Now when it comes to designing a circuit, it's really hard to be put on the spot and to just say, I'm going to design a circuit and then just sit down and knock out a circuit design. Usually, at least for me, is I need some kind of inspiration from somewhere. And to that end, what I actually have started doing is I've started keeping what I call a creativity journal. This is just a notebook that I got from work. It's bound, it's got some ribbon bookmarks in it. But what I do with this is every time I have an idea for a circuit, I write it in here. I put down any notes that go along with it, like name ideas, controls that I want on there, whatever's going to make it unique, parts that I might want to use, things like that. Now this creativity journal is really handy because you can also use it for other things that are not circuit related. I put song lyric ideas in here. I've drawn up a design for a jig for when I'm building my guitars. And so it really comes in handy. In fact, if we were to open this up, we'd see like here's my entry for the KDLA. We've got this is my page that I had for the alternate dimension. You can see that this one is fairly sparse. It just has a lot of kind of the high level ideas for it. And I just like to keep track of the ideas that I have because sometimes, well, for me at least quite frequently, I don't have a fully formed idea right at the beginning. Usually I'll have kind of the beginning of an idea. I'll be like, ooh, I think that this would be something really great to have. And I need to give it some time to kind of think about it, keep it in the back of my mind, stew on it a little bit. And so I come in here and I can add a little note, or I can review what I've had in the past and kind of cross that off. And it just helps me kind of not lose any ideas that might be a really great idea, but that maybe I was, thinking about it while I was at work, or maybe I didn't have a fully formed idea, so I didn't really kind of commit, some kind of documentation to it or something. This just really helps with that. So in order to design something, we need a concept. We need to know what it is we're going to build. And defining what that concept is really important because that is going to set the stage for everything that comes after. So in order to design something, we need to have a concept of what it is that we're going to design. This concept is going to kind of guide our whole process, and it's the foundation that we're going to build the whole design on. If we look here in my creativity journal, I have an entry for a stereo delay. And as I started writing down the different things that I wanted in this stereo delay, I wanted different kinds of controls. Because it's stereo, you've got 2 delay lines, one for the left and one for the right. And as I got going through it, I decided that a ping pong delay would be a really cool mode to have in there. But as I got to thinking about all the other things I wanted this delay to do, the ping pong mode didn't really make sense with the rest of the delay. So in this series of videos, we're actually going to be designing this ping pong stereo reverb. Now, in order to do this, we need to pick what we're going to be based on. If we want to do a delay, we can go digital with something like an FV1, or we could go really old school with an analog bucket brigade design, or we could go with the echo processor chips that have become really popular over the last 10 or 15 years, like the PT2399, or one that I really enjoy using is the ES56033. The ES56033 is a little less well known than the PT2399, but it has some really cool features to it. It can do both shorter and longer delays than the PT2399 can. But because it is a little harder to get your hands on, and because it's not documented as well, for this series of videos, we're going to go ahead and stick with the beloved PT2399. But if you want to see some designs that use the ES56033, you can check out my projects like the KDLA, the Wobble Box, the Stalker. They all use the ES56033 and take advantage of either the shorter or the longer delay time that it offers. So now that we know that we want to do a PT2399 based ping pong delay, we need to figure out exactly what it's going to do. This is the definition stage. And in the definition stage, we're going to figure out what is it that makes this pedal or this circuit different from something else that's already out there. There might be other ping pong delay designs that already exist, but maybe we want ours to have more controls or less controls. Maybe we want it to have some other features that we just haven't found. Or maybe we just want to have it be a good exercise for us. Now, for me, in the case of this ping pong delay, what I want is I want it to be mono in, because most of my rig is mono, but it needs to be stereo out, because you don't get the really cool ping pong effect if you don't have stereo out. You want to hear the delays bouncing back and forth between the two sides. But what I also want is I want to be able to have a mode where the ping pongs are synchronized, so it's even divisions in time between the two of them, but I also want to have a mode where the two delay lines are more independent with their time and their mix, so that I can get a really strong short echo on one side and a long weaker echo on the other, or whatever the mix may end up being. Now for the controls, I know that I want controls for time and for mix for each of the two delay lines, so that's going to give us 4 pots. We're going to need a feedback control, and then we're going to need our switch for our mode. Now, there are some other things that we could possibly do that we'll get into as we go a little more into the definition, as we start to flesh the definition out and everything. But we're going to start with those things as being the big kind of bullet point items that need to make it into this circuit. When it comes to designing a pedal, it really helps to not try and rush right into the specifics of exactly what it is that we're going to do. So, for example, right now we know what we want to accomplish, but instead of jumping right into a schematic, it's really a good idea to kind of take a higher level view of the circuit, to kind of step away from it and to start looking at what different functional blocks do we need to be in there. So in order to do this, what we're going to do is a block diagram. And this block diagram is going to just outline how the signal flows from input to output and how the main blocks are interconnected with each other, so that we can make sure that we have these functional blocks that are going to give us those things that we stated in our definition stage. Okay, so here I've got my tablet. Normally I do my block diagrams with pen and paper in my creativity journal, because sometimes I'll work on a small section of it, or I'll just kind of be putting down ideas that I want to revisit later. And so I find that just having it in a book makes the process a little easier for me. But for the sake of this video, it's going to be a little easier to do that on this tablet here. So to start with our block diagram, we're just going to give ourselves an input here. And I like to put it on the left-hand side of the screen and work my way left to right. And when we are working on this delay pedal, the signal is going to come in. We're going to need both a dry output as well as the delayed output. And so in order to split the signal without having any kind of signal loss or any kind of ill effects of the two different stages, we're going to come and we're going to put a buffer in here that's going to allow us to split the signal. Now you'll notice that I haven't specified what kind of buffer this is. This could be a transistor buffer, it could be an op-amp buffer, but whatever that is, that's an implementation detail that we're not going to concern ourselves with while we're just mapping out the broad strokes of what it is that our circuit needs to do. Now our signal, our drive signal, is going to need to come over here and it's going to hit another buffer. And this buffer is actually going to act as a summing amplifier where it'll take in our dry signal and it'll take in our delay signal and combine them together without allowing them to load each other down or interfere with each other. And so we're going to have this buffer, it's going to come out here, and this is going to be out left. Because this is going to be a stereo effect, we also need to split our signal off, and we need another buffer so that we can take the right side delay signal and mix it with the clean, and we will have our out right. So now we have the entire path of our clean signal mapped out. What's left for us to do is to put in the functional blocks for the delay. So I'm going to go ahead and just put in a block here that's going to be delay 1. I'll put a block in here that is delay 2. You'll notice that I'm already saying that I'm going to have two different delay lines. Some people have tried to do a ping-pong delay using a single delay line and an auto panner, but when you do that, there's no way to synchronize how the panning back and forth ties to your input signal. What we want is, regardless of what we play, we want it to be delayed and play back on the left side, and then delayed and played back on the right side, and back and forth. So we need two different delay lines, and we can actually do this two different ways. In either case, we need to take our dry signal into our first delay line, but then we could do our delay in parallel, which means that we're feeding our dry signal into both of these delays at the same time. But the problem with doing that is that the delay time for our second delay line over here would always need to be twice as long as the delay time for our first delay line. And the PT2399, for all its virtues, has some quirks. One of those being that the relationship between delay time and the value of the delay potentiometer is not linear, which means that we don't have an easy way of enforcing this using just simple potentiometers. You could do it with digital control, but that's more complex than what I want to do on this project. Additionally, the PT2399 has a maximum delay time of about 800 milliseconds. You can make it shorter or longer. You're just going to decrease or increase the amount of signal degradation that is in there. Most commercial PT2399 pedals don't go above about 600 milliseconds. That being the case, that would mean that the delay time for our first delay stage would be limited to be less than or equal to about 400 milliseconds. And that feels a little bit short to me. I like to have the delay go up to 500 or 600 milliseconds. So we're not going to do this parallel structure. instead what we're going to do is we're going to put our delay stages in series. I'm going to erase some of this here, because when we put our delay stages in series, if we want to match the delay times, then all we have to do is make sure that we have the same potentiometer value for the left and right side. And that is much easier to do with something like a dual gang pot, which will get us pretty close to within the tolerances of what the potentiometer is. So we've got the output of delay 1 coming out here into delay 2. Now we're going to take this output, we're going to run it through a potentiometer here, and this is going to become the mix control for our first delay line. I'm going to call this M1. Okay? And then our second delay line is going to come out, and he's going to have a potentiometer here that is going to come out into our right side buffer, and this is going to be our mix 2 control. Okay? And then we need our time controls. So this delay stage is going to have a time 2 control. This is a variable resistor. That's how our potentiometer is wired up. And then this guy, our first delay stage, also has a time control that we'll call T1. And so now we've got our mix and time controls. Now we need to get our feedback control. Because we want this to be a ping pong delay where it's bouncing back and forth from left to right, we also want the feedback to bounce back and forth between left and right, which means we don't want to take the feedback out of this first stage, because if I were to take the feedback out of this first stage and loop it around, then what would happen is the first stage would delay, and then you would hear its repeat in time with the repeat on the left-hand side, and it's going to mess up that stereo image. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to take our feedback from the output of our second delay stage. We'll go like this. Really ugly symbol for potentiometer there. It's going to come back up and around like that. And this is going to be our feedback control. Okay? And so what this is going to do is our dry signal is going to come in on delay 1 and be on the left side, delay 2 and be on the right side, which is then going to come around out here through our feedback control and back into the input to go back to the right side. So now we have our time, mix, and feedback controls. The one bullet item that remains that I don't have in here yet is the ability to synchronize and unsynchronize the time and mix controls between the left and the right side. Right now, I'm showing them as completely independent. However, if we want to be able to synchronize them, what we'll do is we'll actually put in what in this block diagram are going to look like switches. However, the way that we will actually implement them, they could be a toggle switch or a dip switch. They could be jumpers on headers on the board. They could be any number of ways of accomplishing this, but it's going to look like a switch. And this switch in one stage is going to go to our M2 pot, but in the other, it's going to come to this other control that I'm going to call M1B, because it's going to be the other half of our mix 1 dual gang pot. Okay, so it can go there or it can go to M2. We're going to do the same thing over here for the time control, where we have a switch, and this switch will go to, this is kind of an ugly way of drawing it, but it can go here or it can go here. Okay, and this time control is going to be T1 B, and this will be T1A, meaning that I have a dual gain potentiometer. This is one half here, and this is the other half here. So that when I switch it into this mode, the time and the mix are going to be synchronized between the two delay stages. So now, if we compare this to what it was that we decided we needed to be our main features, we have T1, check, T2, check, mix 1, check, mix 2, check, feedback, check, a mode switch, check. But as I've been looking at this, I'm noticing one thing that I think we might want to address, and that's the fact that when our delay comes in to the first stage, or when our dry signal comes into the first delay stage, it is being passed to the second delay stage without any sort of attenuation, meaning that we have a unity gain signal coming out of here, which is coming into the delay, which means that we have a unity gain signal coming out of here, out of our second delay stage. That means that when the note first gets played, we're going to have equal strength echoes on left and then right, and then we will have a reduction in volume and play left and right again. Now, that may be the way that we want it, but we may not want to do exactly that. We may want to make it so that our right side echo actually is a little bit weaker than the left side, so that it sounds like it's naturally decaying, bouncing back and forth. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a control here that is going to be a level control for how much level goes into the second delay stage. And what we could do is we could potentially tie this to our feedback pot using a dual gain potentiometer. And if we wanted to, we can, adjust the taper of this or the value of this using resistors across the lugs, because we don't know yet whether we really want to do this or not. But that's something that I'm going to keep in my mind as we move on to the breadboarding stage in a little while, is to take a look at whether or not having this control makes sense. And with that, we have our block diagram all fully defined. We have our clean signal coming in, it's getting split. We have clean coming out on left and right. We have our delay that's going to go to the left side and delay to the right side. We have all of our controls and features that we wanted. So we are ready to go from the block diagram stage into developing the schematic. So there we have it. We have gotten our initial concept all put in place. We have defined what it is that we want our circuit to do, and we've used a block diagram to kind of map out the broad strokes of how it is that we're going to go ahead and accomplish that. In the next video, we're going to start in on the schematic, and what we're going to do is look at how we can take little building blocks, basic building blocks and pre-existing designs, and leverage those into our schematic so that we're not reinventing the wheel. We'll break it down into small little processes. We'll take each of the functional blocks from our block diagram and we'll turn it into real schematic symbols and make it something that we can really use. Now, the last important part when it comes to designing a circuit that I haven't mentioned earlier is you need a cool name. So I like to keep track of name ideas for each particular circuit in my creativity journal, but for this one, what I thought I would do is, since some of you are going to be following along, in the comments below, go ahead and put your idea for what you think a stereo ping pong delay should be named. And whoever has the idea that I select, you'll get one of the PCBs that comes out at the end of this video series for you to populate on your own. Now, of course, the fine print is that by commenting below, you give me permission to use your idea in all of my documentation and associated with the project. But have fun with it. I love funny names or names that have multiple meanings, but please keep it clean, keep it appropriate for everyone, and have a great time. We'll see you next time. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe so that you can be notified when the next one hits.